Hey guys, welcome back to the weight room. We are going to have an activity day today. So try to get in the gym. If you can't, some simple things at home like a broomstick might be able to give you some extra experience with some of our knee dominant or lower body pushes today. So going to go over a little bit of everything, throw out some examples, some coaching cues, some possible errors, and just kind of talk our way through some of these exercises. So join in as able, please. So it's always good to get extra reps under your belt. As they say, you cannot trust a strength coach who doesn't have calluses on their hands. So just by practicing this, it just makes us better at it, and it allows us to see what other people are doing that is either good or not so good. So can't overemphasize the importance of just getting experience in. So we're just going to jump right into it and start getting some reps in. So remember, we always want to warm up before activity. So especially if you're going to do any type of load on this, go through a warm up. Even if that warm up is 5 minutes, that's better than nothing. So I've already done my warm up, so we're ready to rock. I'm going to start off with the back squat. So for the back squat, a lot of things can go wrong, but it's risk versus reward. A lot of things can go right. We can get a lot of great physical attributes out of that back squat. So it's popular for a reason, but there's lots of reasons not to do it. If you've got low back injuries, if you don't have a spotter, if you've never been coached on it, that might not be the first movement to work on. If you're not able to hit depth standards, may want to seek out some different exercises. So the list goes on, but just know that it's great, but that doesn't mean you have to do it. So starting out, where am I going to put that bar? Well, I was taught that you want to be able to rest that bar under your armpit at a standing height, and that's about the right way to work. That's about the right height for me, and after coaching several hundred individuals on it, I would advise that it basically works for everybody. So we're going to take that bar, and we're going to find a place where we can stand, and it just sits in your armpit. For me, that's comfortable. Climbing under, a couple of things to pay attention to. One is that we want to make sure that the center of the bar is centered on the back of your neck. And it's kind of tough to judge that yourself sometimes. Most bars will have a little center chunk of knurling. That's that rough part on the bar. So we can kind of feel that back there, or actually you can reach back and kind of double check. A lot of times the problem with just stepping under the bar, you get your hands on the bar even, and then you duck under, and somewhere along the way, you go off center. And the reason that might be is asymmetry in the shoulders. So if one shoulder's mobility is a little bit different, both shoulders might feel even, but you come under and you're way off. And if you're getting to the point that you're loading several hundred pounds on the bar, being off by a couple inches could mean an imbalance of 100 pounds or more, and that can cause some really interesting torquing on your vertebrae, which can lead to some interesting disc herniations or bulging discs. So we just want to keep that centered for safety purposes. So ducking under, getting your setup right. Before I even get squatting, I've got some safety catches set up. No one's here to spot me today. So once I start squatting, I'm on my own, right? So I got to be safe. Safety first. Safety's no accident, right? So that's kind of our basic rack setup. If you are squatting and you're using a spotter, talk to them ahead of time. Let them know how many reps you're going for, and let them know how you want to be spotted. Do you want them to, say, hey, if I'm not making it up, let's get me up right away, or do you want them to help you work up a little bit? If you're a spotter, make sure you're communicating, make sure you're clear. If you're uncomfortable with the amount of weight that's on the bar, if they've got a few hundred pounds on there and you're thinking, gosh, I can't bicep curl you and that weight. If you're not comfortable with it, grab some additional lifters or coaches from the surrounding area and have them come in and do some side spotting. And when you're side spotting, think that the bar is going to have plates on it like this, and a lot of side spotters are their range of vision is going to be limited. So when you have a 3-man or a woman, a spotting team, That center spotter is kind of like the general. You're gonna lead the other spotters on the outside because they've got plates in front of their faces and they can't really see. Their eyes should be on the end of the bar, ready to grab it. You know, you might see some of this spotting here. Personally, for my own safety, I ask that people go with the crook of their elbow because that bar is not going to slip out of the crook of their elbow, whereas it can split your hands really easily. As a lifter, don't be a jerk. If you're failing, you can call out for help. But what really aggravates me as a spotter is I'll be back there and ready to help somebody out, and they struggle a little bit, and then they just crash land. They know that the safety catches are down there, and they'll just crash land down to them. And meanwhile, I'm back here getting ready to help, and then I have a few hundred pounds accelerate in my arm, and it doesn't feel very good. So communication is just the name of the game when it comes to spotting and lifting with spotters. So now that we're ready to take the bar out of the rack. Well, actually, one more thing on spotting is if I'm a spotter and someone is squatting right in front of me, so I'll be the squatter for just a second. If I'm squatting back here, what's happening right behind me is my spotter is going to be as close to me as possible. It's going to be a little uncomfortable. We're both going to be able to smell each other. My spotter might be breathing down my neck just a little bit, but what they're going to be doing is being ready to help me at any sign of struggle or failure. And what they would do is they'd hug my chest into their chest and help them stand tall. Now if I'm spotting a female lifter, I'm going to do the exact same thing, but a male lifter, I'm going to grab them on their chest because that gives me a really good grip and ability to actually help them out. If I have a female lifter, for me personally, I'm going to go with closed hands against the shoulders, and that way I'm not getting slapped in the face, and I'm not getting any kind of like legal trouble. So we keep them just as safe, but we also kind of watch where we're putting our hands. So for me, that's kind of how I spot, and you just communicate. Maybe somebody wants help gripping the bar, or they want a little bit of assistance on their ribs. Sometimes I'll see somebody put a hand on the belly of the lifter and just kind of help them stay up straight. For me, most of the time, I let that lifter do their own thing until they are either going to struggle close to failure or to the point that rep is going to basically cost them a lot of energy. It's going to be one of those nasty, ugly, grinding reps that has a really high likelihood of maybe straining their lower back. So that's kind of where I usually step in and help them up. So spotting on squat is a very personal preference, and it's also going to get real personal as someone's basically has their groin against your backside. So, but that's what it takes to be safe during the back squat spotting. So to squat, you've got the bar set at the right height, and if you're squatting with other lifters who are maybe not so tall or are very tall, the shortest person's armpit height always dictates the height of the bar. If you're a short lifter, you tell the tall lifters, like, tough cookies. This is where the bar needs to be for me to take it out safely and to get it back in safely. If you have to take that bar out and you've got to go up on your tippy toes, well, you're going to lose a lot of body posturing just to get out, and then you have to try to reposture and get set again. And then let's say the set is hard and you're going to get in and you can't get into the right spot, and you've got to kind of tippy toe dunk it into the rack. It's not worth all the risk and the hassle. The taller lifters, you get to be tall, that's your advantage. But in the squat rack, when you're squatting with a shorter individual, you got to suck it up and work the bar from their height. So that's just for safety, and yeah, don't try. If you're short, don't have short man or woman syndrome and try to tell yourself you can lift the bar from a higher point. Just do what's safe for you and best for you, and make the taller people go with the flow. So getting a square grip on the bar, come through, get set, do your best to get centered, maybe even ask the spotters if you're centered. A lot of times you'll see people take sort of that split stance to take the bar out. I think that's a mistake. I'm going to try and coach people to get a squatter stance in to take the bar out. Come on out, Normally don't step out of the rack and away from it, but I want my reps to be on video here, so I'm sort of cheating a little bit. You're going to get your reps in. And when you come back in, avoid that temptation to take a split stance to re-rack the bar. Because if something goes wrong and you miss or something is off, then you're in a terrible advantage. You're in a terrible mechanical disadvantage or position to have a very heavy load on your back and to not know what's going on. So that's why we want to step in, reassume a new squat position, and rack the bar. Let's see, looking at my cheat sheet here. Just so I don't have to take that bar out over and over again, let me grab my roll stick here. Our biggest issue on squatting, our biggest problem issue is going to be lower back strains. So knowing how to brace your core is going to be extremely important. For me, some ways to check and kind of teach a little bit are to give people some little karate chops in the belly. You know, you tell them you'd be ready for a punch to the belly basically, and that's going to help take care of that front side. And on the back side, one of the best things we can do is just tighten up our butt. If you've ever yelled at a dog or had a dog get in trouble, you see that they kind of tuck their tail and run out of the room. So if we have tight glutes and a tight belly, that's going to really reinforce that lower back and help us stay safe there. Part of your warm-up should also definitely include some activation of both the glutes and the core. Revisit those McGill 3 before squatting is not a bad idea at all. If you're going really heavy and you want to teach some Valsalva maneuver, is the name of a breathing pattern in which you're going to take a deep breath in, inhale down in the belly, and you're actually going to hold that, and you're going to compress your muscles back into that full belly of air, and that's going to reinforce stability in your spine. So if I'm at the top of a squat, maybe it's going to be a heavy rep, light rep, or you're just practicing the maneuver on a light rep. That's not a bad idea either. Big breath in, tighten your belly, tighten your butt. You've got that full belly of air still. You're going to squat it down, and then press up, and exhale after you get to that sticking point. So big breath in, tighten the belly and the butt, get your rep in, squatting down, pressing up, getting past that sticking point. This is where a lot of people are going to fail. Once you pass that sticking point there, you can exhale out. That's your Valsalva maneuver. A lot of people will get really high blood pressure. You'll see them turn really red. Passing out is not a major, it happens, but it's not a major issue. But if you feel yourself getting close, maybe rack that weight or call for a spotter or sneak some air in. So just be aware of that, and don't save using a Valsalva maneuver for desperately heavy weights. Practice it along your warm-up sets as well. Foot position is going to vary, and you're going to hear different theories on that. Some philosophies will have almost a sort of a sumo stance, extremely wide and externally rotated. And what they're going to do there is they're shortening the range of motion. So if the big goal, maybe it's a powerlifting mindset, if the big goal is to get that hip joint beneath the knee, or to get that femur to parallel or below so that the squat counts, it's to depth. If that's the mindset, a lot of times a bigger, wider stance and down to the hole. Well, if you look at it, and I'm really not even going that wide there, but some individuals will get way out here. I'm just not going to do that because it doesn't feel very good on my hips. But if you look at that, I'm taller. When the narrower my feet get, the taller I am. So I actually have to move that same amount of weight a further range of motion. So that's part of that philosophy on having your stance wide and your feet externally rotated. The muscles that are activated in that wide stance are going to help translate into a narrow stance. That narrow stance not so much into the wide stance. So there's another benefit of that big wide squat. For me, I know that our femoral heads can be quite different. So not only can they be different from one femoral head to the other femoral head, they can also be different. Let's say I was maybe I was a twin or a triplet, and me and my sibling counterparts might all have different shaped femoral heads. So we all may have different squat patterns and squat heights that feels good and is within our range of mobility. So you're going to kind of vary that squat stance just a little bit. I wouldn't go too narrow. Personally, I don't love going too wide. For me, that makes my hips feel crummy, and a lot of the powerlifters that are in the highly competitive space that use that stance end up having some hip replacements, and that may have something to do with the big wide stance. It also may have something to do with putting 800 to 1,200 pounds on their back on a semi-regular basis. So for me, I'm going to take, to get the muscles activated that I want to activate and to challenge those, I'm going to take a stance slightly wider than my shoulders. My feet are going to be slightly externally rotated, and I'm going to slightly externally rotate those feet because that's giving my glutes a little bit of a pre-stretch, because one of our glutes do three things. They abduct, they hip extend, and they externally rotate. So when I've got my feet wide and slightly externally rotated, that's giving me a little bit of a head start on that external rotation movement. And actually, as I'm squatting, what I'm going to be doing is pushing my feet in the ground, and I'm going to be trying to spread the floor with my feet, like I'm trying to do the splits under weight kind of. And also what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be trying to externally rotate my feet. I'm going to be screwing my feet into the ground while I'm trying to abduct. And if I'm doing those two things, I'm getting 2 out of my 3 hip activation movements that have to do with my glutes. And then the third thing I'm going to do that's going to get all 3 movement patterns for my glutes. So I'm spreading the floor, I'm externally rotating, I'm also pushing my hips back. If I push my hips back on the way down, what do they need to do on the way up? They need to come forward. And so now I'm working a little bit of that, you could say hip extension a little bit, arguably. So now I'm getting all 3 patterns on my glutes. One of the biggest muscles in my body is going to help drive my squat pattern. The better my squat gets, the better a lot of other things are going to get. Back squatting. Okay, let's go to front squat. Many of the same principles on front squatting are going to apply, but it's definitely a different movement. It's going to better stress, whereas the back squat is going to better stress our posterior chain, our glutes, and our hamstrings, and it's definitely hitting quite a bit of quads, but it's just going to hit more glutes and hamstrings than a lot of other squatting patterns, specifically the front squat. As we move that bar from the back to the front, our center of mass jumps forward, and now that front squat is constantly going to be pulling me down, and it's going to be challenging my abdomen here. So a lot of times we think about the rectus abdominis working as a matter of spinal flexion, whether it's crunches or sit-ups, but actually it's going to be working here in our squat patterns. It works for anti-flexion. It's going to help. It's going to kind of like tighten up like a turtle shell, and it's not going to get crushed downward. So a lot of our top squatters actually have a tremendously strong midsections and cores. So the front squat is going to better challenge our midsection, and then it's really going to help isolate our quads a little bit more. Safety factors in the front squat. You may not even use a spotter. And what you might want to do is talk to someone who spots you on the back squat, whether they're a lifting partner or a coach. And you want to say, hey, if I'm struggling on this front squat, I'm going to dump it forward. Whether I've got some bumper plates on a bar or I'm just going to make a ruckus and dump that bar onto the safety catch, don't spot me on the front squat. Or maybe you do want a spotter and you can say, hey, grab my chest, support my elbows, support the bar. But you talk to them about that and communicate ahead of time, as usual. I've worked with another coach who not too long ago had his pinky bone busted out of a meat on his finger because he just naturally, instinctively jumped in to spot somebody on a front squat, and that lifter just dumped the bar out on the safety catches, and the coach was kind of pinned in between the bar and the safety catch. So, you know, sometimes things go wrong. That coach kind of knew, you know, consciously afterwards. He was like, "Oh, I should have left him alone. We didn't talk about spotting." That's a mistake on my part. But really, that communication takes place. It's a two-way street. So, on that front squat, you can go. Let's try that again. You can go full grip, as if you were catching a clean. If you've got some troubles with lat flexibility, shoulder mobility, or wrist mobility, you could possibly drop down to a couple of fingers. You could cross it over. You could do zombie arms. And then another kind of hack on that would be, let's see here. Another kind of hack on that would be to take some lifting straps here, and you're going to wrap them around the bar. And this is kind of one of the ways that we modify if that positioning is difficult. And for me, on front squats, if I'm using a group that is going to be doing a lot of cleaning into a front rack position, I will challenge and demand from them. I'll set a standard that we need to get good at front racking that bar. So on front squats, I will challenge or demand them to front rack it. But if I'm not doing a lot of cleaning with a group, then that front squat, I'll cross the arms up. I'll use some cheater straps like this. And now it's just so much more comfortable, and I've got quite a bit of support. So for me, yeah, I don't mind that. But it's, again, sometimes you have to meet your lifters in the middle. If you're gonna really demand that front rack position, you gotta understand that you might spend a whole lot of time working on mobility and getting lifters safe there before you even get any decent weight or challenge on the bar. And so do you want to chase that front rack position for several weeks, or do you want to maybe throw some straps on there and get them training a little bit harder? That's a little bit for you and your philosophy, and kind of know why you might be doing one or the other. But for me, on that front squat position, if I'm not challenging that same group to do an Olympic lift or Olympic variation of a lift that requires a quick and natural transition into a front rack position, I don't really care. I just want it racked out there. Zombie arms, crossover. I might let them go down to 1 or 2 fingers. Whatever we got to do to get comfortable and accomplish that front squatting. Again, that front squat, when people tell you their wrist hurts, most of the time it's that their lat flexibility and their shoulder mobility is actually in the dumps. So a lot of times you're going to have to stretch and work that position as opposed to fixing their wrist. That front squat tends to be a little bit of a narrower stance with the toes a little bit facing a little bit more forward. And then on all of these squat variations, we really want to watch out for knee valgus. So having those knees tuck in a little bit there. If they do it slowly in a controlled environment in the weight room, they're going to do it in a fast, uncontrolled environment such as a volleyball court, basketball court, soccer field, or whatever it is. And when you see athletes that are landing and their knees are tucking in or folding in, or they're getting ready to jump and their knees fold in, what you're looking at is a precursor to knee injuries. So why does the knee stay neutral or wide? It's from glute activation. And the weaker that glute gets, and the more that knee tracks inward and inward, and those patellas start firing in misalignment and the patellar tracking goes off, you're really risking and you're nurturing an environment where ACL tears and other issues are going to present themselves. So we want to watch out for that valgus knee. That may be a result of crummy glute activation or a lack of glute activation. That may just be bad motor patterning on their part. And you also want to look at that foot. If that foot is pronating and inverting like that, we want to work and talk about driving to the outside of the foot and those things we talked about earlier with spreading the floor, trying to rotate the floor. Yep. Dumbbell goblet squat. So grabbing a dumbbell, Great way to, if that back squat is kind of like your king movement, king of the back squat, king of the squats, your front squat is probably a precursor to that, and your dumbbell goblet squat is probably a great precursor to your front squat. And just right here, and that just makes life easy. Now the limiting factor on this tends to be upper body strength. And there's a good argument there, is that means that it's not as effective a movement as a lot of the other squat patterns. But think about your sport. If you have a wrestler, wrestlers need tremendous lower body strength as well as upper body strength, but their upper body is in the game way more than their legs are. You know, they get down in little positions where their legs are just the foundation, but their arms are doing all the work, or doing all the active work. So if a wrestler cannot goblet squat a respectable amount of weight because the arms are dragging them down, maybe that goblet squat becomes a way to sneak in extra upper body work. It's just a thought there. If you're working with a swim team, our long distance swimmers are kind of like upper body cross country runners. They're not going to use their legs a whole lot. They actually, because the legs utilize so much oxygen and kind of suck from their well of oxygen, that a lot of times your distance swimmers are very upper body dominant. So maybe, depending on your philosophy and a lot of other factors, maybe that dumbbell goblet squat is going to be better for a distance swimmer, a distance event swimmer. Goblet squat, also going to be good for beginning lifters. It's a simple movement that allows for easier teaching and quicker implementation. And also, if you've got an injury in the midsection or core, or your hips are bothering you a little bit, that might help us work that mobility, work that range of motion with a lighter weight, but it also can be challenging, and you can just maybe just go to higher reps if you want. So that dumbbell goblet squat has a time and a place. We're going to move on to the Xerxer squat. You don't need a pad, but a lot of lifters will appreciate it. So you can just take a hip pad. This is not a squatting pad. I would not encourage anyone to use a squatting pad for their upper back. If you've never back squatted before, I know that bar kind of hurts the first few times it's up on your traps, but you will get used to it. Even if you're a leaner individual, as long as that bar is not on your spine and it's sitting on that trap meat, when our arms go back like that, those muscles protrude a little bit and they keep our spine safe. So I know that a lot of times it genuinely hurts. So this is a bar pad, what do they call that? You might call it a squat pad, but really this one is designed for use on hip thrusts and glute bridges. And you can also use it on your Xerxer squat, although you don't need it. It's kind of just a preference. On that Xerxer squat, typically going to put that bar a little bit lower than normal. And you're going to go in, and you're going to let that bar sit in the crook of your elbow. And grip from there can kind of be, you can cross the arms up, you can just hold them straight ahead. And then from there, you're just squatting with it. And some of the benefits of the Xerxer squat, well, we're kind of blending and mutating several of the movements that we've done already today. But just like the front squat pulls your center of mass forward from your back squat, the Xerxer squat does it just a little bit more. So now your center of mass is way out front. So if you've got a weak belly, we've talked before about the importance of pursuing and challenging your weaknesses. So if we identify that the abdomen is a weak spot and you're getting stalled in your back squat, you're plateauing in your back squat, what you may want to do for a little while is either front squat or actually Xerxer squat. because that's going to help challenge that belly a little bit more in that core and midsection. And then who would that be appropriate for? You know, any sport really, but individuals who need some extra core and midsection strength, the Zercher squat may be for them. And again, you don't need that pad. You can sit that bar right in the elbow there, and it kind of makes you look tough, and that's what we go to the weight room for anyways, right? So consider that a Zercher squat, and just maybe if you're not going to use it for training, maybe just use it for warm-ups one day just to see how you like it. So it takes a little bit of getting used to. Just like if you've never back squatted before, that bar can kind of hurt sitting on your traps. If you've never Zercher squatted before, that bar kind of hurts a little bit sitting in those muscles. I have never seen anybody strain a bicep or a arm muscle Zercher squatting, even with tremendous weight. You know, in the mid 300 pounds is what I would consider pretty outstanding for the general population or for amateur athletes. But yeah, so consider that Zercher squat as well. All right, so we're gonna move on to some other squat variations. The split squat. So we're gonna set up the same way we would for a back squat. Everything's going to be identical to a back squat setup. And then just as you might back squat, we're going to take a split stance. And I'll do a couple reps from couple different angles. And on that split squat, I'm trying to work my front leg. Now I'm just down and up. And we'll do a couple reps from a couple different angles. And you can perform this movement in different ways. If you're on that front foot, if you're a little bit more toe driven, your quad is going to get a lot of activation, a lot of work. But if you're driving that heel down in the front leg, you're going to get more glute and hamstring activation. That's something I learned recently listening to Coach Mike Robertson of Robertson Training Systems. He just talked about doing an offset variation of it, where we're twisting into it and out of it. So just to demonstrate how I was doing it before I learned about this, I'd be right there, and how I'm playing around with it and really enjoying challenging that glute and hamstring now. Again, my weight is on my front heel here. I'm going to come down and I'm going to get a little bit of a quarter rotation in, and I'm going to rotate back out of it. So that's that offset variation with the twist. That's going to give you more glute activation and a little bit more hamstring activation as well. So again, think about the action of the glutes, that external rotation. So if I'm allowing myself to rotate into it, if I'm allowing myself to rotate into it here, then to externally rotate out of it, I have to call on that glute over here to help me drive and rotate out. That's your split squat on just level ground. Move on to a rear foot elevated split squat. See if I can guesstimate a good position for the camera here. All right, so just treating it like a back squat. We're gonna try to set up everything. I kind of did a full back extension out of there, so that wasn't my best unracking. Now on this rear foot elevated split squat, I don't want my back leg doing much of anything aside from helping me just balance. So a lot of people will put that toe down on the backside, but I find that encourages activation. So I'm going to coach laces down with a lazy foot. And to get a rep in here, we're just right there. All right. Now, because this is less stable, it calls on your stabilizer muscles a little bit more. It causes you to create the stability. So on back squat, we've got a lot of stability. And on our rear foot elevated split squat, not a lot of stability. So I'm stabilizing more through both my core and my glutes. If I want even more glute activation, I'm going to call on that offset variation again, where I'm rotating into the bottom of the rep and out of the bottom of the rep. So that's that rear foot elevated split squat. And I came across those split squat variations not too late in my coaching career or in my lifting career, but I wish I would have known about them sooner. I wish I would have been employing them earlier. They're great. They're going to translate better to the athletic field for the most part. They challenge your legs more than your core, whereas our back squat and our front squat, they're leg exercises, but not really. Your limiting factor there is basically always going to be your core and midsection. So your back squat and your front squat, if you want to get them up, what you probably need to do is not extra leg work, it's probably extra core work. But when we go and do split squats or rear foot elevated split squats, we are challenging our legs a little bit more, especially with that stabilization piece, and that in theory should translate to our sporting events a little bit better. Let's see, borrowed my daughter's tea time stool here. Sometimes we have tea parties, and this is my go-to stool here. But for step-ups, I want you guys thinking about all that muscle action, that knee dominant pushing that occurs on a squat pattern. Well, on a step-up, it's very similar. You're going to get a stabilization piece like that. I lost my balance just a little bit at the top there. You control it down. So if you've got somebody with a lower back injury or a hip injury or an asymmetrical hip, knee, or ankle injury, well, that injured side you can leave as just a stabilizer, and that healthy side can keep working. And you can play around with your height. Higher is not always better. Once you're getting so high up, if my box that I'm stepping on or my surface is so high that I can't initiate the movement with my top leg, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's less control and it's more variables within the training, because then you got to think, well, how hard was I pushing off of my other leg last time? So just something to think about. Controlling your tempos and just keeping notes on how high your step-ups might have been is going to boost your consistency with training. I'm going to link below our video here, I'm going to link a couple of movements. Some backward sled dragging, which is going to help with quad isolation. Not every weight room has leg extension machines, and that's not super applicable for athletes anyways. Sometimes just getting backwards on a sled and doing some back pedaling is really going to isolate your quads, burn them up, but it's also going to hit some metabolic effect and have a cardiovascular stress on the body as well. So I'm going to link a video to a backward sled drag. I'm also going to link a video to a forward prowler push. So I love prowlers. Think that muscle action is basically if you've ever had a car broken down or helped out a buddy whose car is broken down, and you're on the back of the trunk pushing that car down the road. It's tough, and prowler pushes are a tremendous activity for building speed, hypertrophy, strength, and endurance. You can do whatever you want with them, and they also are going to allow us to work our sprint mechanics in an excellent way. So it takes all your sprint mechanics in your acceleration phase of a sprint, so like the first 5 to 10 yards of a sprint, and it really mimics it on a prowler push, but you can load extra weight on there and you can slow down and you can coach it up a little bit better. So prowler pushes are excellent. I'll just put a little link in there. And then another couple exercises I want you guys to think about is a terminal knee extension. So we have a muscle just inside of our kneecap, our patella, that kind of looks like a little teardrop in there. And that's your VMO, your vastus medialis obliquus. And when that gets a little weak, your patella, that little kneecap bone, will start to track laterally a little bit more than you want it to. And when it's tracking laterally, you have an increased risk of ACL tears. So with these with these terminal knee extensions, that VMO fires a little bit more in like the last 30 degrees of extension of our knee. So with terminal knee extensions, the band works really well. Just taking a little small movement just like that is really going to isolate it and work it. And so if you're at risk for an ACL tear, if you're dealing with patellar tendonitis, this is a great movement to challenge and work that vastus medialis obliquus. It's called the terminal knee extension. You can do essentially an identical movement with a small surface. So grab yourself a short box or stack up a couple of plates. And right there. So not a very athletic movement. On the sporting field, I wouldn't really want people's knees tracking out over their big toe on a regular basis. But this is not a movement per se. We're not training this for the movement quality, we're training this for the muscle activation. So I'm gonna do, it's a little counterintuitive. I'm gonna externally rotate my foot, and then I'm still gonna let my knee go forward, inside or over the big toe, to stress that VMO and get some activation on that. So not a typical push movement or knee dominant exercise. That's a really isolated one, but it's good for preventing ACL tears and preventing and resolving patellar tendonitis. So again, that a lot of times on patellar tendonitis, that patellar tendon will start to track laterally, but activating that VMO can help center it and get it back in neutral position. Nice. That's pretty much it for our lower body push day. The only thing, I'd probably talk about overhead squats. I don't really do them. They can be a great challenge, but they can also challenge your mobility more than your strength. So for me, I tend to just simplify it and use the squat variations we've talked about today to get a little bit more aggressive with my intensity and my loading. If you want to do overhead squats, it can be a fun challenge. I would just encourage you to be safe and err on the lighter side for quality of reps as opposed to some high intensity challenge. So that's probably my last note for the day. Great. I'll see you guys back in here for our lower body pull day.